Hello, good morning, good afternoon, I guess maybe good evening, depending on where you're listening to. My name is Ben Courneen. Welcome to our webinar today, our podcast style webinar, What Happens When the CEO and HR Aligned, with Chris Courneen, Global Director. I just heard Chris is now VP, so congrats on the promotion there, Chris. We'll get started in just a couple minutes. Still people logging in, so give us one and a half minutes, we'll get going. Well, I've got 3 after the hour. So again, for those of you just joined, welcome to our webinar today. Hi, hello, welcome, wherever you're coming from. My name is again, Ben Courneen. I'm your host for today's interview. I'd like to start off today really quick before we get going, just to thank CoMeet and iRecruit as two of our sponsors for today's webinar podcast style that we're bringing to you all. Today, for this episode, I'm really excited. Maybe stoked is a better word. I don't know, that we get a chat with an expert when it comes to connecting the CEO and HR. And today, really thank you for our audience for tuning in. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the CHR's role in deliver a positive business impact when it comes to alignment. And while innovative technology helps in this effort, it's only part of the tool set needed. And we're really going to dive into that and identify things that CHROs and directors of HR and VP of HR, we're going to dive into that conversation with Chris a little bit, and really what you need to do to drive in and make real change to the bottom line, impact the bottom line. Late in 2020, we learned from aptitude research that over 50% of human resource and talent acquisition professionals at a number of organizations are not effectively measuring the impact or the ROI of their efforts. And so we thought it was wise to maybe bring this together and hopefully provide some value for everyone listening today. Caught us a little bit off guard, to be honest. So we've invited Chris Courneen. He's the now VP of HR at MSI International, or MS International, MSI. And we're really, really excited to hear from his experience around what happens when we connect the alignment between the CEO, senior leadership, and HR. Chris, good morning. How are you doing?
Good morning. I am wonderful. How are you?
Good, good. You're probably in warm. I think you said you're in California and warm, and I'm looking out of Idaho here, and we've got a pile of snow in front of me. So a little bit different of our worlds, right?
It is a bit different. It is sunny outside, and I'm probably wearing this jacket because it's cooler in here than it is outside.
Well, awesome, Chris. Well, I know, first of all, thank you for taking time to come and chat with me today. We really, really care about what happens when HR and CEO can align in organizations and what it means for the business. Maybe to paint a picture, rather than me try to butcher an awesome introduction of you, paint a picture for listeners. Share a little bit how you landed in HR and now as a VP. What was that process like?
Yeah, so I did not start my career in HR. I started in a management kind of training program for a large industrial supply and distribution company, where I got a pretty unique and I'll say lucky opportunity to kind of cut my teeth in a variety of business units. So I've managed in sales, big call centers, million square foot warehouse, kind of the supply chain and logistics side of the business, and really didn't have anything to do with HR other than I was managing and leading people, and relied heavily on the talent of our staff. And over time, I think, as probably most people have experienced in their working career, grew frustrated at points with HR, and was given the opportunity to manage a recruiting function at my prior organization, and just kind of fell in love with the work. I ended up back in the business, out of HR, managing back in the business, and just really loved the work and wanted to get back into it, and then was given the opportunity to do that, and then spent many years kind of managing within the HR function and got exposed to all of the fun stuff that comes with that beyond just recruiting. And then kind of moved over to MSI, where I'm exclusively focused, I guess by title in HR, but really I get maybe the point of today is it's in title, but really it's about the business and the general impact of the business, and helping business leaders think about leveraging probably the single most valuable resource any of us have, and that's our people.
Right, right. And as we go today, we'll chat a little bit probably about what that looked like when you came on board with MSI into kind of a new role. I know that's pretty of an exciting story, but maybe, everyone's still dealing with this thing we call COVID. Before we go down that road too far, did your role at MSI pre-COVID and today, maybe are there big differences, or is it still all about the bottom line?
Well, I think ultimately there's probably two general schools of thought within HR in terms of what is our base purpose for even existing within the organization. And I kind of go back to like high school economics 101, and businesses exist to maximize profit. And so if everyone within the business, their function is to figure out how the business can maximize profit. We think about how to do that in a variety of different ways. And although I may not be thinking about growing sales, I'm thinking about managing talent that can grow sales. And I think pre-COVID and post-COVID, ultimately the end game is the same. How do we help the business become more profitable? Now, I'll tell you, strategies and tactics to achieve that ultimate goal changed a lot with COVID. Suddenly, the joke with HR is we are people who hire, we are counselors, we're psychologists, we're the police, we are, thought leaders, all sorts of different things. The badges that we have, or the hats we wear, change day to day. And then suddenly we became public health nurses and contact tracers and all of these other things that, if you would have asked me pre-COVID, I would have told you HR has no business asking half the questions we seem to be asking on a daily basis now. So, I think the day to day has absolutely shifted due to COVID, but I think ultimately the goal is the same, which is how can I keep, a workforce engaged? How can we set a strategy that allow people to do their best work? And now a big focus of that is how do I keep people safe and healthy and comfortable? As an essential business, we've worked through COVID, so we had a unique challenge in that I also had people on site through most of this. And so, we also became, readers of medical journals. I bought subscriptions to JAMA. Like, I would have never in a million years thought I was reading medical journals and trying to understand the latest medical research. But that's the fun part of HR. We wear so many different hats within the organization, and that's probably part of what attracted me to HR in general.
Yeah, it's really awesome. I know, I personally love our HR team here at Verified First. They're amazing. Elizabeth Varghese in our webinar last month, she called them keepers of the flame. It's like you keep the flame lit everywhere you need to go, and you guys just get it done. But I like the comment, Chris, that pre-COVID, post-COVID, it's still about, as a business, how do we operate and remain profitable, right? At the end of the day, you kind of have to be profitable to be able to keep people employed, and you have to have good people to be profitable, and vice versa. It's kind of a chicken before the egg, or egg before the chicken kind of thing. So maybe transition a little bit. So you came on board at MSI. How long ago was that?
I started 18-ish months ago. So when I came on board, kind of the middle part of 2019, most of my experience at MSI in the first 6 months was learning. I think I was very fortunate, actually, that our organization, and talking with the CEO and leaders here, was very interested in me learning the business. And I think that was part of the beginning part of that alignment, really, is going even through the interview process. I know some places will say, I want to know your 60, 90, 180 day plans. And the first comment was, don't come here thinking you're going to change things in the first 3 months. Because if you do without learning the business, you're probably going to fail. And so really, I think an important part for me, and probably this is about the experience before coming into HR, is I got to know and understand the business. Before I was in HR at my last organization, I had a high level of confidence that I understood the business and the goals and strategies of the company, and that organization invested a lot in ensuring that its leaders knew and understood those things, and walking into a role in HR with that context helped tremendously. And so I wanted to ensure that that was going to be part of the experience at MSI. And I think that was probably the first place we really connected, because the response was good, because any other answer would have been a problem. You need to go spend time in sales, go hang out and understand what our commissioned outside sales workforce does, understand our role in the marketplace, understand, the experience of a CDL driver. We're a DOT regulated motor carrier. We want to own everything about our process. So we aren't just selling material, we're transporting material, we are storing material. So understand the distribution side of the business. And really, thank goodness COVID gave me some time to learn the business before a lot of my focus shifted. But I would say the first 6 months, I probably spent more time out of my office than in my office, really digging in and understanding the business and the people. I think the other big part is, every business has its own culture.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the understanding the culture, I think, is critical within HR, because part of our job is, I say we beat the drum. We beat the drum of who we are and who we want to be as a company. We beat that drum for ourselves. We have core values. We print them on cards. We give them to everyone, and we say, this is who we are. And in an HR, you really need to understand that at a deep level, because you can't successfully set strategies for the business if you don't understand the company's mission and core values. And so really, the first part of my experience was ingraining myself in that. You learn, wow, we do things here so much better than my prior employer, I can't believe it. And wow, we do things so much worse here than my prior employer, I can't believe it. And then ultimately it's like, well, it's different because, I am also fortunate, both my prior employer and this employer, wildly successful businesses, wildly profitable, wildly different approaches in ways that you would think might impact the organization's ability to be successful, and yet they did not. And so, I say I spent my first 6 months earning an MBA in what we do before I could go out and actually start doing anything.
Yeah, that's respectful. Not every, I think, CHRO or VP of HR or talent acquisition director, they don't have that opportunity, Chris. So with that in mind, if someone's already in that role, maybe they've been there for 6 months, maybe they've been there for 5 years, I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations in maybe how they can start aligning with the CEO and that executive leadership team if they don't have a seat at the table? Because I think what we've heard from thousands of companies is COVID has now given HR a seat, right? They now have a position at the table of the decision making. Any recommendations for someone that maybe doesn't feel like they have that influence or don't have that kind of a connection for alignment?
Yeah, I think, there's some very specific things. And one of the things that I strongly believe is you do need to be able to speak the language of the business. Part of what I think can sometimes happen is that, talking about the seat at the table, the HR can feel like the outsider there. If you don't understand the business, if you don't understand the language of the business, then you are going to struggle, I think, to communicate with any leadership team. So you have to spend the time and invest the time in understanding what are the challenges the business faces. When I walked in the door, we were in the midst of a massive trade war as a country, and in particular with China. We're the 13th largest importer of goods into the US, period. A trade war is a significant threat to our business. So I needed to understand the threats to the business, not just the people. And I think that's a key part of it is HR leaders need to understand the business. So even if that is on your own, spending time with other business leaders, understanding what are the goals for your sales organization? What are the goals for your, if you have a distribution organization, what are the goals for your IT organization? Why? And probably the biggest, piece of advice is you start with asking questions to understand, and then you do have to invest in yourself in being able to, whether it's understand the big one for me is you got to be able to understand the data and dig into the data. And
Mhm.
so I frequently run across, particularly within HR, folks who are just not comfortable in quantitative analysis. They're great at working with people. They're awesome at employee
Uh-huh.
relation, but I think really to get to that next level, you need to be able to do more than that, which means you need to be able to understand at some basic level some things about finances. But beyond finances, if you can't do the quantitative analysis to find the trends, even within your own HR master data and your people data, to then tell a convincing story, it's going to be hard. But when you can sit down and present a story using the combination unique skill that HR people pick up in terms of getting people to give us information, being really good listeners, and all that qualitative data, and then combine that with the ability to speak to quantitative data, that's the true power of HR, because
Mhm.
we can't just live behind spreadsheets either. And so part of it is you have to invest in yourself and be able to be comfortable, I think, in both worlds, quantitative and qualitative. You do need to spend time understanding the threats of the business, because then you can give the context to your ideas that sit within the overall context of the business. If you think we should improve engagement because of what this survey told me, but you can't tie that to the business or an issue the business is facing, or if you're bringing up something that is so not relevant to the
Yeah.
three biggest problems the business has, you're going to quickly be dismissed. And so the other piece of advice is typically as we're setting strategies within HR, your strategy can't be that much different than the business's strategy. I took, essentially, we have these core values on this card, and I rewrote it for HR. And I said,
Mhm.
okay, if this is the company's value, its purpose, I took the exact same format and rewrote it for HR in a way that showed how we support the company's mission, how we support the company's values, how we support the company's purpose, and being able to tie your ideas to real issues in the business is the other really important thing. Because I think if you're sitting down talking and everyone's talking about what are we going to do, we can't import goods from China without, in our case, it's 550% duties. Well, how does HR support that problem? And so your strategies need to be closely aligned with the business. And I think the last one, um, truthfully, is, and I believe this strongly, HR isn't the police and we aren't the no people. When I'm training
Uh-huh.
HR folks, whether my staff or others, one of the first things I say is get the word no out of your vocabulary. We don't say no. We help people assess things they may not have thought, and it's a trap we fall into where we over manage risk, and we stop making business decisions. Now there are times where people might have a really bad idea and you might want to tell them no, but part of this is the process of saying, okay, well, let's talk about what happens if we do this. Let's
Mhm.
talk about the impact of the business. Let's talk about maybe risk. The one of the things I tell people all the time is we're here to help people be successful. We're here to support the business. We're a service function within the organization. We just have a breadth and a scope of impact that most people don't have the pleasure of having. If I'm a sales leader, my scope and impact is about sales by and large. But
Right,
in
right.
HR, I get to touch every part of the business. And so the challenge is you also kind of have to understand every part of the business, but then you also to be able to partner with those parts of the business in a way that they find meaningful. And so you do have to find a way to add value for the group you're working with. And if that's your focus, how do I help you solve your problem? And think about it from an angle that might require a people strategy, you are much more likely to get buy-in, because now they want your help. You're literally
Yeah.
helping them instead of putting up roadblocks and creating bureaucracy and all of those things. If you spend your time focusing on how can I get roadblocks out and reduce bureaucracy and make your job easier, or improve the performance of your group, or help you figure out how to impact retention in a way that means you don't have to staff to train as many people. Now all of a
Right.
sudden you're talking a language that people want to hear.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's interesting, and maybe this is a specific example. I know we chatted previously a little bit before the call, but there was, I think, an example. You guys have multiple locations, and maybe dive into that example a little bit, Chris. I think from my memory, it was you have locations, you let managers you give them advice, like you just mentioned. How does that dynamic improve HR, like your level of respect throughout the organization, all these different locations.
Yeah, so MSI is such an unique and awesome company in the way that you're describing. We really push very hard this idea of autonomy and entrepreneurism. So we have, we're an importer. We're the leading importer in North America of hard surface products. So your counters, your floors, your mosaic backsplashes. The chances are, if we've got one of our products in your home, and so what we bring into the country from about 60 other countries, or that we manufacture domestically in the US. It's big, it's heavy, it's cumbersome. And when we talk about growth, our mission is in terms of growing the business also means expanding our footprint nationally. So we have over 30 locations across the country, in the US, Canada, and overseas, India, and some other countries. And what we have learned is to grow the business, we want to give a very high level of power, autonomy, and authority to the local branch leaders, abnormally high levels. And so understanding that perspective in the business strategy and why that strategy exists, it makes HR challenging, because I can't come in and effectively lay a blanket approach that will work in all areas. There's a few reasons. Right. Culturally, I'd get pushback like you wouldn't believe here. If I walk in and say to a VP who owns a region of the country, here is how you are going to manage performance in your building, right, or here is now how you're going to hire. Culturally, that won't work. I'll get fought every step of the way. Practically, as a strategy, we don't think that will work, because we want to give that local, for lack of a better term, business owner the freedom and flexibility to be very creative, because we think innovation comes out of that creativity and that entrepreneurial spirit. And so for us, I think it's a great example of, I had to first really learn that about the business, because it is the polar opposite in many ways of some of the prior experiences I had, where we were moving toward more common structure. And once I understood that, and I understood the why and the how and the kind of the culture, the challenge became, how do I figure out how to help you solve your problem, or how do I help you figure out you have a problem you recognized? And that's, I think, where this partnership idea comes from. And I think business partners is a popular term within the HR community. But I think it really goes a long way to describe what is required to be successful within HR, and that is, you have to be viewed as a partner. Because if you're viewed as a partner, that local branch that may have had an approach that you think isn't the greatest, well, before you can have that opinion, and in our case, I have to understand the context of the local branch and the leader and the things that have happened, and then I have to spend probably a little more time educating and sharing and developing that local leader. And having more of a dialogue. So it's very rarely a one-way discussion. It is a true dialogue. And then partnering with that person on a problem-solving exercise. And so I view a lot of HR work as just problem solving. And if you've got high turnover, let's figure out why. And your bias of it's regional and it's about the part of the country you're in, and everyone has high turnover. Well, then part of my job is, I got to be an educator for a moment and say, is that true? And I have resources you may not have, so let's figure that out. And then part of it is, now let's dig into the process, and can I recommend a few things? And I find myself, as much as I also don't like saying no, I really don't like telling people, and this is how it will go. One of the things that I think is helpful, and I saw this in my prior organization and here, oftentimes it's better to let someone think it's their own idea. Like, ego doesn't do well in HR, especially when you're trying to affect change. And there's a skill to getting people to understand a process or a procedure and all that, but there's a separate skill, which is planting seeds of ideas. And as long as you're going down a direction that is better than the direction we were going down before, the other hard part about HR is you kind of pick and choose your battles. And if this is better than it was before, but I think it could still get better, but I can go spend more time somewhere else and get that even better, particularly in an organization like ours that has only ever grown year over year over year. You got to be really careful with where you spend your time. But ultimately, in that type of model, it's much more of a partnership. Let me figure out how you need me to help you. And along the way, I might plant a few ideas that get you to realize some other things I want you or think I need you to do. And then ultimately, at the end of the day, even though we are HR and we're supposed to be the experts, we we don't always have the right answer. And I think that's the other side of the
Yeah,
coin
yeah,
is, we aren't always perfect and we don't always know the right answer. And that partnership usually gets you a better outcome. Even if I've spent years hiring people, that local team has spent years hiring people in that market too. So let's figure this out together.
yeah. It's really interesting. And, just for our audience real quick, there is a chat feature and go to webinars. So if you have questions for Chris, you can chat those. We had one come through from Aurora, and I think this was actually came through a little bit earlier before the webinar started. Her question, CEO and her don't align evidently on many things. Actually, she says most things. And, CEO only deals with HR because he has to. What would you have as a recommendation from Aurora to help the CEO see more value in that? I mean, you kind of talked about getting to know the business and some of that already. Are there anything else, Chris, that stands to mind? So the
Yeah.
CEO, doesn't see HR as the word she used as a irritation.
Necessary evil or the
Yeah,
admin group
yeah,
that handles the paperwork. Yeah. I think there's a couple of things that come to mind. One of the things, and I learned this very actually early in my career, was to be able to quantify the benefit that you're bringing. And in HR, sometimes it's really hard because I think there's a bias that a lot of what we do is fuzzy, when in fact, I think a lot of what we do can be quantified. And in some cases, the way to do it is to break it down into dollars and cents.
yeah,
So, part of that is being able, in some degrees, to spend the time to figure out how to quantify the benefit that you bring or the outcome of your work, and break it all the way down to dollars. One of the things that I have done in and outside of HR, but particularly inside HR, is been able to point to and say, this thing that we're focusing on, this change, here's how much money I just saved the business, or here's how
yeah,
much additional revenue we've generated since this change happened. And although three things happened, let me show you how I am tying this change to this thing we did. So one is quantify your work, the ROI that you mentioned at the beginning of the discussion.
right,
I don't think people spend enough time by and large at figuring out how to calculate their ROI.
right.
And I take that all the way back down to dollars and cents to be able to say, this thing we did, I just saved the company $2 million. That's better than generating $2 million worth of revenue. $2 million
Yeah,
worth of revenue, you got to subtract costs from that to get your actual net benefit. I just saved us $2 million, and I can show you how I did it. That's impactful. I think
yeah,
the other area is the mindset here, because look, I don't envy someone in that situation. It is very difficult,
mhm,
especially when there's a pretty strong bias there. The other tactic is you may not start with the CEO. There is likely a champion somewhere in that organization that you can partner with, help you. Part of that process, like I'll give an example here, when early on when I was starting, I needed to partner with my finance team and our finance VP to understand some things about costs and start to attempt to get my mind around some things. And then once we could work together in a way that ended up helping help both of us achieve positive impact and positive outcomes for the organization, you now have at least one cheerleader helping you. Now, in the
right.
example I gave you, I was trying to quantify benefit. I was like, we don't even know what we're spending on some of this stuff. Help me figure this out, because I'm going to help us save money. And you say that to a finance VP and their ears perk, because that's
Right, right.
music
That's
to them.
what I want.
And now fast forward, he and I are working very closely on an initiative that is we're going to save millions, and it wouldn't have been possible without both of us doing it together. So part of this is you don't need to start with the CEO. Find another champion within your organization.
Sure.
And then so quantify your benefit, focus on ROI, find another champion. And then the third one is, and I think people do tend to appreciate this, I keep a really close eye on productivity so that I can also demonstrate HR's impact on productivity. This is probably related somewhat to ROI, but a lot of, I'll call it legacy HR work, is unproductive. And HR is viewed as a cost center in that way.
Right.
If you're in an organization that views your work as a cost center, find a way to reduce your costs. At a minimum, that's going to make people happy. Once you found a way to reduce the cost of your organization by getting more efficient, streamlining flows, all of that, removing bureaucracies, the other piece that you can then pivot to is, and I know I'm saying this to a bunch of HR folks, but focus a little less on risk. I think one of the traps we fall into is being preoccupied with risk. And one of the biggest pieces of advice I received early in my HR career from a very senior leader in my last organization is we were tooting our horn for having not been sued for 5 years or whatever it was at that point.
Right.
And we were showing all the work we were doing to prevent it. This gentleman sitting in the room and not visibly paying attention on his phone, like every bit of the microaggression that tells you this person does not want to actually be in this conversation. And then at the end of it, he's the first one to say something, who was clearly paying attention, and said, maybe we don't get sued enough. Are we making good business decisions? Are we so preoccupied with risk that we're preventing the business from doing the right thing? And are we doing the right cost benefit analysis here? So the thing that took me back to is we should be constantly doing a cost benefit analysis. Now, I'm not saying go take a bunch of risk and get the company sued all the time, because that's not what that means. But what it means, focus on business decisions, because sometimes, this is why, I love lawyers to death, use them all the time. Lawyers don't make good business decisions though. So being able to understand the difference between risk and business decisions and taking smart risk, doing the right thing by your people, and being able to demonstrate that for the CEO, when the CEO can see that you're thinking like a business person and not a risk person, when the CEO can see, even if they think you're a cost center, that you're doing what you can to become more productive, to reduce costs, when the CEO can see that you have advocates and other folks within the organization, and when they can see that you're able to quantify the benefit of your work, you're going to start to change some minds about the value you add within the organization.
That's spot on. It's kind of interesting, and I don't know if you saw the rest of Aurora's question, but it goes into how do I see him, that it's value for me to protect him and the company, and it's that risk conversation just mentioned. So Chris, we're kind of at the halfway mark, and what I'd like to do is maybe shift the gears, because what we've heard is, oh man, you got a lot going on, and to manage so much going on at the time, all at the same time, there's obviously some technology that goes into that to help drive that. And, maybe you can paint a picture of, what ways you and your team there at MSI use technology, to help business leaders solve their challenges, or how you guys add value to them via technology. I know it's just a means to an end.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly what I was going to say. Technology really is, I think, a means to an end. So the question here is pretty interesting. I'll use the context of MSI and then maybe a larger set of contexts, but we view ourselves as a very technology forward company. We have pushed in ways that people in the building products industry don't push, to integrate technology into who we are. And it's part of who we tout, is core to who we are. This augmented reality feature that we pioneered in the industry, and we share all these awesome things, and I use these tools and they blow my mind. And then I look at HR and I go, what happened? We spent all this time and energy and effort and money here, and unfortunately here the business has even been saying, like, what happened to HR? Like, why is HR behind the rest of the company? And so really, I think it's an interesting kind of setup to this idea that HR and HR technology should be evolving at the rate that the business's technology evolves. Maybe in some cases ahead of the business's technology. And so this legacy HR work, which was heavily administrative, it was a lot of paperwork. HR people love their files, can't throw away anything, all of that. And there were checks on all the little things that we had to do. And you have, entire people within the HR profession where that is their job. Their job is to manage these processes. And my general question is why? Technology exists that can do all of that for us. And so really, in terms of HR, I look at it in a couple big buckets. One, I gotta get rid of the HR junk work. I gotta get rid of the paper processes. I have to get rid of the it's like I use the doctor's office example. We say this a lot here as we're in evolving on this path. You go to the doctor's office and you have to write your name on 3 different forms and your address twice and all this, like, and it drives everybody insane. Why do we make people do that in HR? So the things that annoy us in our real life should annoy us within HR too. So streamlining all of that allows our HR team to now focus on value-added work. It allows our HR team to spend less time reviewing paperwork and more time partnering with the organization to reduce attrition. It allows the HR team to spend more time with employees to understand what's going on. It allows us to work on more projects to figure out how to make a sales group more productive and think about compensation differently on how we incentivize people. So the first big bucket of HR technology is to just free people up. We have too many people, too many talented resources focused on root tasks and admin work that just shouldn't exist. And then the second part of that technology, I think, is probably along the lines of the business analytics and taking advantage of big data. There is so much, and I think the world has learned that the biggest future commodity is data. And we have tons of data about our people. And so kind of getting into that predictive analytics phase of HR where you use technology to leverage massive quantities of data to help improve decision making and outcomes. And then you'll add on all the fun stuff about natural language processing and AI that again reduces, I'll call it, the root work of HR, particularly in the talent acquisition phase, talent acquisition and background checks, particularly, sourcing at the very top end of the recruiting funnel, folks, and qualifying who should even be applying and who should not. That is work that if you talk to a career-long recruiter, nobody likes to do. There's a ton of burnout. There's a ton of turnover for those sorts of jobs. And so how can we use technology to improve what it even feels like to be a recruiter? So there's the get rid of the junk work and the admin work and get HR out of this idea of being admins. But then there's this other idea of use technology to really advance our ability to make good decisions and to leverage decision makers instead of doing root tasks.
Yeah. So, Chris, I know you guys had staff on site, as you went through COVID as a, essential business. I'm assuming, and I'm making an assumption here, so please tell me if it's an assumption, but I'm assuming that you guys had to maybe transition into a little bit of a quicker pace on digital transformation of HR processes as a result of COVID, from people, interviews being remote. Can you walk us through that? We had a question come in from Tyla, and the question is, what's been the biggest challenge with trying to go through that digital transformation and onboarding and engaging employees after COVID hit? Just curious if you've had any experience with that.
Yeah, so I think, so a number of things happened. I'll talk about the front line of the digital transformation that most businesses experience, which is if you can get people to work remotely, do it. And so here's a unique way HR gets involved in business decisions you may not think about. So I'll start in India. I have hundreds of employees in India. They work for us at our location. We don't outsource that work. They're our employees. COVID is spreading and we're seeing lockdowns happening around the world. Our business would be crippled if I suddenly had 400 people that couldn't work for us in these support functions. So the step one was figure out how to get them to work remotely. And I think a lot of businesses went through this. We started it in India, which was a unique challenge in figuring out how to make sure everyone had internet, everyone had devices, purchasing devices, distributing devices. We then roll that into the US, and now you have to start thinking a little bit about the risk thing, and you start going, hey, wait a minute, what laws do I now need to worry about as the business is running at 1,000,000 miles an hour to get people to work remotely? How do I make sure I don't run afoul of something? But then beyond that, how do I start partnering with the IT organization and the sales organizations to figure out the best way to do this equitably? How do I make decisions about who gets to work from home and who does not? So one of the areas that HR played a role in that sudden increased speed was to ask some questions that may not have been asked. So as we're going 1 million miles an hour and we got hundreds of people working remotely in a week and a half, it blew my mind how effectively and quickly we did it. But at the same time, we're the group of people that are probably asking 3 or 4 of the questions that your IT team isn't thinking of. So that's one area that actually became very interesting within our organization, is making sure that we're balancing. And again, don't go overboard on the risk side, but let's ask the right questions. And how are we making some of these decisions? Because inherent in some of this technology change are decisions. And questions around fairness and equity and all of those things come up, even as you think about advancing technology, questions around disabilities and all sorts of things. The next layer of that, as you kind of alluded to, was, well, what about us? How am I going to onboard someone? How am I going to recruit someone? How am I going to interview someone? And there was a balance for us because we were an essential business and we continued operating physically. You know, if we stopped clearing containers out of the port, the whole country can't import anything. Our containers would very quickly clog the main ports in the United States. And if you thought toilet paper was hard to get a hold of, then imagine if we stopped working. So this was not an option for us. So then there was this question about balance. Once you've made the decisions about who's remote and who's not, then it's, okay, I know I'm bringing people on board. I know they're going to work from a physical location. I now have to partner with IT and our facilities groups to figure out not only the physical change, but the technological changes. Here's a simple one. Collaboration is huge here. We always work together. It is culturally common here for 3 people to huddle around a computer and try to figure out an issue for a customer. I can't do that anymore. So do we have the technology in place so we don't stifle collaboration, even if someone's in the building? How do we get a solution and a tool to train and onboard new hires? So then decisions around technology started being around not only access to tools and new technology to allow for collaboration, you know, Zoom, Skype, GoToMeeting, everybody had that. But then there was the human element of it, of you can't just roll this out and think that people are going to do this, because it is still culturally easier for me to walk over to your desk and go, oh, it's no big deal. So there was this very interesting balance there. I think the onboarding part also became interesting because it became a technology and a space problem. I can't put a bunch of people in a classroom anymore and go through on orientation. Or if I did, I have to figure that out. So our technology issue was about digital technology. It was about new cleaning solutions. We took it as far as, you know, we're fortunate, again, because of our size as an importer, we were importing masks and cleaning solution and things from overseas before anyone thought that this was going to be a big deal. And then we gave away tens of thousands of masks to hospitals. We were doing all of this, and then we said, hey, wait a minute, how are we going to clean the place? We did all this work to import the stuff that was obvious. Then we started thinking about technology outside of a computer. So we said, all right, we started doing research on UV cleaners, electrostatic cleaners, things like that supported people being physically in the workplace, and then acquiring equipment. And it all goes back to, how do I keep people feeling safe and healthy at the workplace? Because even if I think the workplace is healthy, if you don't agree as an employee and you don't come to work, it doesn't really matter. And then the last part of the technology, I think, which is probably even a little bit more obvious, is around acquiring talent and interviewing and all of that. So what happened for us is our shift happened to push us up further upstream to figure out how to source talent, onboard talent. And it actually, for us, paused momentarily some of our other technology projects, but it was only momentarily, because then we very quickly learned our volumes aren't changing. We were very fortunate. Our volumes went up. So suddenly the urgency of digitizing all of those root tasks became even greater. All of a sudden, it wasn't just, oh, we should do this. This is the right thing to do. It's a good idea. It'll save us time. It was, I now have to make a choice. I hire 5 more people in HR because I just took on a bunch of work. We're now contact tracing and working with health departments and talking to employees about runny noses at levels we never did before. So I have utilized my human capacity. It's now even more urgent that I free up that time by digitizing the stuff in the process that I can. So we brought in what we meant by technology. I learned a lot about HVAC systems, and UV light and ozone cleaners and ion cleaners and electrostatic sprayers. And it proved that the business needs HR, kind of that seat at the table that if you didn't have it before, you suddenly did, because the question about bringing people back in the workplace or keeping them there suddenly meant, who's reading these new laws that got passed every 4 hours for like a week straight? Who's going to understand the legal side? Who's going to understand the compliance? Who's going to partner with facilities? Who's going to partner with IT? Who's going to partner with all the other business leaders? The one thing we did is we paused for a month and never should have some of the technology projects, because then we just said, turn it up 1,000%. This has to happen faster, because our world changed. We got busier.
Yeah, it never changes. Chris, and just a simple follow-up question maybe from Tyler. If you look at, I know you've only been with MSI for about 18 months, you said, but do you think that employees feel like they have the same level of, I guess, integration in the company with new hires today versus new hires pre-COVID? Do you think the feeling of, I don't know what the word is, the feeling of community maybe? Do you think that's the same as your investments?
And again, I think we might be a little unique here. My answer is going to be yes and no. I think the feeling has changed a little, and we have done a lot of things explicitly to try to improve that connection to the business. So we were very afraid of this, even though we have people on site, because culturally here, you used to take people to lunch all the time. You did this relationship building, you worked side by side, people took breaks together, and all of a sudden I was telling operations, stop letting people take breaks together, reorganize schedules so people can't take breaks together, do all of these different things. We were very nervous about that. So we did a few things to try to combat that. One, during the thick of COVID, we had weekly meetings with business leaders, because we didn't want our leadership team to suddenly feel disconnected. Even though we wanted these independent, autonomous entrepreneurs within our business, during a crisis like this, we needed the team to feel like a team. We needed them to have the confidence that if they didn't have the answers, someone did, and that someone was doing the work and had their back. So our CEO and myself, every week, we were leading company-wide video calls, being extremely transparent about what's happening to the business, transparent about law changes, transparent about everything, to start to make sure that this community of leaders that probably reveled a little in feeling like they were independent from each other now suddenly felt more connected. Because in that moment of crisis, we needed to be a team to get through it. No one independent leader should have taken the weight of that burden on their own. So that's the first part about the team building. We, over time, said, okay, we'll do this every other week, we'll do it every month, once we started kind of easing in. And then we said, for the rest of our team, we, for the first time ever, we put our owners on camera and had them record video messages to share things with people. We had our local teams talking, holding one-on-one discussions over, video chats, people who are working from home. We actually pushed this idea that you have to go out of your way now to achieve some level of engagement, whereas in the past it felt natural. It was part of our culture. We were trying to educate people that you now have to actually try at this. If you don't try, you will lose some connection. We started doing things like publishing these videos for our crew so they could hear from the owners of the business. We made it through a really tough time. The business did really well. I made every leader in the organization handwrite thank you notes to 2,500 people. And I was shocked at how little groaning I heard, because that's a lot of work. But you know what? I was also shocked when I started getting the emails forwarded to me from other people of the employees. Oh my gosh, I've never gotten a handwritten thank you note before. Like, thank you for recognizing me. So the other thing we did is we said, you can't take these people to lunch. It's hard to build this sense of community. At least let them know that you recognize the sacrifice they've made, the changes they've made, and the effort they've put in. We did all kinds of other things along the way to try to build that community. I think, again, we were a little lucky because we still had people physically, in a warehouse working, but the folks who are working from home, we had these, I know a lot of leaders did virtual lunches. So we'd send Uber Eats to someone and get on a web chat. And in the beginning, we thought it sounded a little funny, but really employees just appreciated the effort. The same way they appreciated the effort of a handwritten thank you card, the same way, we gave so many different things, we tried so many different strategies because we were worried about it. Do I think it was effective? Overall, I think it was. I scroll through my LinkedIn feed and I see people post a picture of their thank you card with their MSI jacket, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, you guys, it meant a lot, but it was more effort than we've put in the past. So you had to be conscious about it. And I think overall it worked, but we had to try way harder than we ever had in the past.
Yeah. Well, we only got a few minutes left here, Chris. I kind of promised you I wouldn't take more than an hour. Let's transition just really quick. I like to engage our audience, and we're going to launch a quick poll just to kind of get some input related to technology conversation we just had. This is kind of interesting, and if we can go ahead and get the poll started here. There are areas of technology that some people are thinking about. COVID kind of made people rethink their tech stack. And, as you mentioned earlier, Chris, it's kind of a means to an end. So let's go ahead and pull up the poll here. The question is, what areas of technology are you looking to replace in the next 6 months? And then, Chris, to wrap up, you and I can have a quick little conversation about what we see as the results. Let me see here. I'm going to go ahead and pull this up. There it goes. So take a moment, if you don't mind, as our audience listeners, go ahead and take some time and respond to our question there, and we'll give it just another second. So Chris, there's a couple questions. There's a ton of questions that come in, and we'll close the poll here in just a few more minutes. Trying to connect value to the CEO, technology alone doesn't do it, I think is what I heard. And,
yes.
When we chatted previously, I think I asked you a question like, as you go through this, you guys are very business driven, strategically trying to connect that profit, returns, makes a lot of sense, right? Some organizations, they're all about their people and taking care of the people. And I kind of asked you a question about people versus profit. Yeah. And I think the response was both. Maybe we can recap that as people are still answering their question here. People and profit, technology kind of brings those two things together sometimes.
Yeah, I think, again, if the business's goal is to be profitable, to maximize profits, my goal is no different. I just use a strategy that helps, in some cases, remind people that you can't be profitable if you're not productive. You can't be productive if you aren't engaged. You can't be engaged if we're not doing some of these things. And so, I do think it's kind of this circular argument I end up making even with myself, because if I'm focused on profits, I have to be focused on people. If I'm not focused on people, I could have a great product. I have an awesome product, and if I can't distribute it as quickly as my customer demands, I have a problem. Now, I could try to fully automate my process, but I've been in the warehousing logistics industry my entire career, and I'll tell you, shy of predictable, big, repetitive motions, Amazon cannot automate the warehouse. My last employer couldn't automate our warehouse, and we're not automating fully this warehouse here. So you're not doing the job without people. The way technology comes in is, think about technology as ways to let people be better people. So in a warehouse automation is about improving ergonomics, removing root tasks, reducing injuries, so that people have a better outcome on the fulfillment process to present a better end product to a customer who's receiving it. Technology augments people. Within HR, it's the same story. Within sales, it's the same story. I want processes that are repetitive and use decision trees to be done by a system, so that processes that require me to sit in front of you and read you and engage with you, and then combine that with what I know about your data to then make a human decision, to be where I spend my time and my effort. And if I'm doing those things, the business will be more profitable. And our job in HR is to show people the connection between that increased profitability and this. Now, there is an argument to be made about some things, which you'll say is either a moral imperative for the organization or it's just the right thing to do. And there are some things like that here that are truths that we believe about ourselves, and that's great, but that argument falls flat unless it's a common, universally held truth within your organization. And if you're trying to affect change, arguing it's the right thing to do when not everybody agrees or when someone can point to a business outcome that disagrees is hard. So utilizing technology is really to me, the means to an end just means it just makes us more profitable. The cost of implementing a new digital benefits resource platform is direct, not only savings in time spent in HR, but time your employee spent when she or he could have been working but was fiddling with paperwork and systems and questions they couldn't answer, which was also frustration, which led to a disengagement in the workplace because I can't believe this place is so difficult to work with. I'm just trying to get my kids on my benefit. Like, if you can start tangibly measuring those things, I think you start seeing the connection to where technology does just make us more profitable. That's why we use technology. But for me, it's all about augmenting people so that they can focus on what makes people unique. And that's our ability for empathy. That's our ability to connect in a way. And if I can remove the distractions with technology and allow me to focus on those things, the outcomes are going to be better.
Yeah. So just sharing really quick the results here with everyone of the quick poll we did, Chris. So really this comes back to the conversation of getting rid of the admin work in HR to make your people bring more value to the organization, to the business, right? This is kind of where people are at with, hey, we're thinking about from an HR tech standpoint, some things we might change in the next 6 months. Does one of these stand out as maybe from your experience, right? And I know everyone's business is different, experience is different. Are one of these, in your mind, something that could bring the most value? And upfront and honest, no, I'm not asking for an endorsement. I'm asking, is there one of these techs that is, as a head of HR, or VP, a CHRO, that you would say this is critical to freeing up my people to do value added for HR and getting rid of admin work? Is there something on here that would say, look there first if someone's looking?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk from the perspective of a business that is growing right now. Our business has never had a backwards year. We have only experienced growth. We are very fortunate over the last 45 years for that to be the case. We work very hard to make that the case. That means acquiring talent is critical. I have plans for lots of new branches, major new facilities. If I can't put people in those positions, the business will not be successful. So a big area that I immediately go to is, how do I speed up the talent acquisition process? So something around the ATS and the background screening idea, those things go hand in hand, because again, and maybe this is from my process-oriented background, one of my big beliefs within talent acquisition is, if I can reduce the time to fill, it's not just, do I get the person in the business faster, but I'm more likely to get a yes from you. If from the moment you post your resume to the moment I put a job offer in front of you is faster than the next person trying to hire you, I am more likely to get you to say yes. And so the speed with which we can acquire talent isn't just about, I got to hire 600 people this year. It's about, I am competing with lots of businesses trying to hire the same group of people. That was true in a full employment perspective where we were pre-COVID. I'll tell you, post-COVID, it's no different. We were competing with unemployment rates in some states worth $35 an hour. So it's really hard to compete when you get paid $35 an hour for unemployment. And I'm trying to hire someone to work in a warehouse. But what we found is, I'm not the only one trying to hire people to work in the warehouse. And I'm not the only one trying to hire someone to work in IT right now. And so my competitors are other businesses trying to acquire talent, and anything that speeds up that process is valuable, because reducing time to hire puts people in seats here, but it also means I'm more likely to get the yes, and I didn't waste all my time on a candidate who's going to go somewhere else. So I jumped there, and then I jumped, almost immediately after to something around performance management. I think that's kind of where I'm going with the assessment as my number two. because again, kind of understanding performance management and development, leveraging big data, leveraging the tools you have, that's critical to succession planning, future growth, all those things.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Chris, I know we're upon our hour, and it seems like we could just continue for another 5 hours. I mean, the passion that you have bringing value to the business from an HR perspective is huge, and we're certainly grateful for the opportunity to have this interview today. And I see your contact info, so I'm guessing that if someone that really wanted to reach out, or you made MSI sound like a great place to work, they could probably hit you up there.
Absolutely, yeah. I have no issue. Please, if there are questions or someone wants to chat, I can make myself available. I work the oddest hours since we have people all over the world, so it's not a problem.
I know it's really interesting, because there are a couple questions like, hey, I've got 2 CEOs, and how do you manage through that? And there's just questions that are so unique that the nice thing about the HR community, the CHROs and VP and leadership, is they come together to help each other solve their business problems. So, thanks for being willing to provide that. Again, thank you for your time, Chris. We're really grateful for the interview. Again,
Absolutely.
For everyone listening today, this is a wrap. This is our episode HR at the Table, brought to you by Verified First and CoMeet and iRecruit. I just want to call out Verified First. We're a host of this, really just as an opportunity to bring HR leaders together. And what we do is background screening. At the end of the day, we've got a slick patent browser integration that connects over 120 HR tech platforms, ATSs, HRISs, onboarding, payroll. This innovation provides clients a turnkey experience with all American top-notch client care. You want to learn more about Verified First? That's all I'm going to say. Our phone number, our website is on the screen. You can visit us at www.verifiedfirst.com. Again, Chris, thank you. And I hope that we get a chat again here in the near future, and keep driving that business growth. It's exciting. I can tell you the AR you guys are doing is costing me money. My wife is taking pictures of counters and trying to tell me I want this granite over that granite, and I'm just, oh my gosh. So good job at what you're doing.
Tell her, look, wait till she gets to the court site and all the other fun stuff. You'll be in trouble.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, again, for everyone listening, thank you so much. Thanks for joining our webinar. And Chris, have a fantastic rest of your day, and keep safe, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Yep. Thank you.